We'll just begin with some invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 12, which is entitled The Killing of the Demon Aghasura. And we're reading text 25 through 28. So I'm going to read the English translation 25 to 27, and then we'll look at the Sanskrit of 28 and read the purport. So this is starting with text 25. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who is situated as Antaryami, the Supersoul, in the core of everyone's heart, heard the boys talking among themselves about the artificial python. Unknown to them, it was actually Aghasura, a demon who had appeared as a python. Krishna, knowing this, wanted to forbid his associates to enter the demon's mouth. Text 26. In the meantime, while Krishna was considering how to stop them, all the cowherd boys entered the mouth of the demon. The demon, however, did not swallow them, for he was thinking of his own relatives who had been killed by Krishna and was just waiting for Krishna to enter his mouth. Text 27. Krishna saw that all the cowherd boys, who did not know anyone but him as their Lord, had now gone out of his hand and were helpless, having entered like straws into the fire of the abdomen of Aghasura, who was death personified. It was intolerable for Krishna to be separated from his friends, the cowherd boys. Therefore, as if seeing that this had been arranged by his internal potency, Krishna was momentarily struck with wonder and unsure of what to do. Text 28, which has the purport. So I'll read the Sanskrit. Yam kimatrasya kalasya jivanam navad amisham shasatam vihimsanam vayam katam syat iti samvichintya kyatva vishatundamasheshadrighari. Translation. Now, what was to be done? How could both the killing of this demon and the saving of the devotees be performed simultaneously? Krishna, being unlimitedly potent, decided to wait for an intelligent means by which he could simultaneously save the boys and kill the demon. Then he entered the mouth of Aghasura. Purport. Krishna is known as Ananta Virya Sarvagya because everything is known to him. Because he knows everything perfectly well, it was not difficult for him to find a means by which he could save the boys and at the same time kill the demon. Thus, he also decided to enter the demon's mouth. Om Gyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Vaganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandhu Jagatpate, Gopesha Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhaivacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Beg for the blessings of the assembled devotees. Who ask for your blessings. May our words be aligned with Guru Parampara, and may all the devotees be benefited by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. May Shri Radha Mulidhar Shri Gaurachandra be pleased with this attempt. So again, this is 10th canto, 12th chapter, entitled The Killing of the Demon Aghasura. And we read text 25 through 28. So through hearing this pastime, let us try to enter Vrindavan together. And when we hear these sweet pastimes, there's no need to overthink them or overanalyze them. But we just enter with a simple heart, an attitude of service, an attitude of gratefulness, and we just hear. And also there is some symbolism in this story. Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains the different demons symbolize different anarthas, so we'll discuss that also. But when hearing the story of Krishna and his cowherd boys, it's just sweetness, it's just joy. And if we also just hear in a simple way, we'll taste the pleasure of these pastimes. So Krishna, he got up early one morning and he blew his bugle, which is made from buffalo horn. And all the cowherd boys, when they heard this sound, they woke up and they prepared themselves and they went outside to be with Krishna, to join Krishna. He was like calling them by playing his bugle. And they joined Krishna and they all went into the forest to have a picnic. And they had their lunch bags, they had their flutes, they had their bugles, they had their sticks for, directing the calves. All their calves came too, so many calves. And there was a very playful spirit, and they were in the forest, especially boys can play in this way, but they were stealing each other's lunch bags, and when one boy came to know that his lunch bag was stolen, he would start looking around for it, and then he'd see that the boys are passing it to each other. So he would go running after, and then the boys would pass it further and further away. And everybody was laughing. But when the boy cries, when a boy actually gets upset and cries, they return the lunch bag to him. So in this way, they're just playing. And Krishna sometimes would wander off into the forest on his own and just behold the beauty of the forest. He'd see something very beautiful, the beautiful Vrindavan forest. And when the boys realized that Krishna's gone, they would say, let's go find him. And whoever touches him first wins. So they go running after, and they'd go to find Krishna, and the first boy to touch him would win this little competition. And the boys were also imitating all of the animals in Vrindavan. They would see the birds were flying above. So on the ground is the shadow of the birds. So they would fly. They would run on the shadow, just like the bird with open wings. They would imitate and run along with the shadow of the birds. And they would sometimes see some ducks. Ducks are just kind of sitting there. So they would just go sit next to the ducks silently. And the frogs, jumping frogs, they were imitating the jumping frogs. They were imitating the dancing peacocks. And monkeys also. Sometimes monkeys will make faces at you. And so they sat before some of these monkeys and they were making faces back at the monkeys. And they jumping also into the trees like the monkeys. So in the midst of this sweet story, there's a verse by Shukadeva Goswami. And he reminds us this famous verse, Krita Punya Punja, that he's asking, who are these cowherd boys that are doing this? Just step back for a moment. This is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the controller of everything, the origin of everything. And who are these boys that are actually playing these simple games with him? Krita Punya Punja means, what pious credits have they performed in the past to be able to play with the supreme absolute truth, God? They're joking with him. They're playing games with him. They're fooling around. They're laughing. They're eating breakfast and lunch with him. Who are these cowherd boys? How is this possible? What did they do to have this position? So, the sweet pastimes of hearing. And then you take a step back and just think for a moment, what's actually happening here? So punya, the pious credits, so-called pious credits, is not like good karma, the acharyas explain. It's because of their pure devotion. They've accumulated, they've amassed this great blessing, the greatest of all blessings, to be in the association of the Supreme Lord in a very intimate way. So by pure devotional service, they've achieved this position. Some of them are there eternally. Some of it's their eternal position. So there's no question of amassing pious credits. But others also can attain that position through the process of bhakti, through pure devotion. They come to be a friend of Krishna. So they're playing in this way. And a great demon appears, very powerful demon. If you translate this demon's name into English, it means the demon of sin. Aga means sin. Agasura. He's the demon of sin. What is that? Bhaktivinoda Thakur, describes that these demons refer to anarthas, unwanted things in our heart. And this is one of the greatest demons, Agasura, so powerful. And he represents cruelty out of envy, enviousness. It's like the demon of envy. And he was, it says, Kamsa Anushishta, which means this demon was particularly instructed and sent by Kamsa to kill Krishna. This demon is the younger brother of Putana, Bakasura also. So he wanted revenge for the killing of his siblings, and he wanted to kill Krishna, and he was trained and instructed by Kamsa to do so. And so he appears here on the scene in the middle of the playing cowherd boys and Krishna. in the middle of all this, this great demon appears. And this demon, so this is what we have to observe here. This demon was watching first the cowherd boys playing with Krishna, and his heart started to burn with envy. He couldn't tolerate seeing this carefree joy. He couldn't tolerate seeing the fun that they were having. You know, this is the nature of envy. You can't tolerate the joy of another. You can't tolerate the happiness of another. It's said a Vaishnava is paradukkha dukhi, which means a devotee, when they see somebody suffering, they also feel that suffering themselves. And when they see somebody happy, they also feel glad in their hearts that that person is happy. But when there's envy in the heart, this gets reversed. You get the exact opposite. When somebody is suffering, you feel happiness. You feel glad. And when somebody is happy and glad, you feel suffering within yourself. Why is this person happy? Why is this person joyful? So this paradukkha dukhi, this is the advanced state of a devotee, that they are in harmony with whatever a person is feeling. You know, if a person is feeling happy, they also feel happy. That happiness is not the happiness of sense gratification. A devotee doesn't feel happy when somebody is experiencing just selfish gratification. But when there's some true satisfaction there, contentment, some peace in the heart, devotee feels glad, that is good, you know. But here's the opposite. So Aghasura sees that the cowherd boys are enjoying in such a sweet, playful, carefree way, and he's burning with envy. He's angry, and he wants to kill all of them and kill Krishna. And he has mystic powers. He has this power, which is called Mahima Siddhi, which allows him to expand, to become gigantic. And he takes this form. He assumes the form of a gigantic snake, a gigantic python. Have you ever seen a python? They're very awful. Actually, here in Florida, there's a problem with pythons. There's so many of them in the Everglades, just like South Florida. There's a section there where, you know, these pythons don't come from Florida. So somebody, you know, wanted one as a pet. And now there are actually said to be hundreds of thousands of pythons in South Florida. And they're so awful. They're so, you know, some of them are 18 feet long. Imagine you're taking a little walk, you know, through the forest, taking a little walk in some park in Florida, and you see an 18-foot python. And they actually eat. They can eat anything. They're eating so many of the mammals. They can eat deers, you know? And there's so many deers are now missing. This is a problem in Florida. I heard about this, you know, at my work, but there's so many mammals that are now missing and have been eaten by pythons, that pythons are now eating alligators. Can you imagine that? They're, you know, and alligators, like everyone fears coming to Florida because of the alligators, but the pythons can actually open their mouths and take in an alligator, and they have this ability to contract their body, and just very slowly, they're just squeezing and squeezing. So anyway, so imagine this demon, the form of a gigantic python, so awful. And, you know, it's explained that this image is very awful, right? It's very gruesome. But we should also know that that snake, that envy, the snake of envy, is also present in the heart of the conditioned soul. Very deep in the cave of the heart, we have this envy. this is the real cause of our unhappiness. This is the real cause of unhappiness in the world. That this is kind of what's going on in a very deep place in all of us. And we can kind of hide it, or we can kind of just get along normally in life. But if we're on the spiritual path, this has to be confronted. We have to want to see this. And, if we really ask God, Krishna, show me this. I actually want to see what's there in my heart. I want to see the real thing that's preventing me from surrendering to you. I want to see what obstructs me from taking shelter at your lotus feet. Show it to me. It should be our prayer to see it. Because it's hard to do away with something or to deal with something when you don't even know it's there first, right? If you want to let something go, you have to have it first, which means you have to see it first. So this is an important stage. Whatever religion we're a part of, whatever spiritual path we're on, there has to be a stage of really seeing the darkness that's there in the heart. You don't have to know all the details about it, all the ins and outs of all your weaknesses, but you have to see that this is the real cause of unhappiness. This is the real cause of suffering. It's within me. Formerly, especially in the West, if somebody suffered or if somebody was sick or there was some illness, people would accuse them that it's because of your sins, you're being punished by God. God is punishing you from your sins. That used to be a strong idea in the world, right? It's still there, of course, with some people, but especially we see in Bible and in the Western spiritual traditions, this was kind of misused in some ways. This was used and misused, this idea that it's because of your sins that you're suffering in this way. Somebody had leprosy, you're sinful. And as a reaction to this, then humanity had to tend in the opposite direction and come to a totally different view of things. Every time there's a counter reaction to something, it also goes beyond the truth to the opposite extreme. So humanity with time began to reject this idea of personal sin, of God, of evil, of personal evil. They began to reject this. And what happened because of that is now we have a situation where we don't consider ourselves responsible. There's no personal responsibility for human unhappiness. We just think that, we just find ourselves like we see ourselves as victims of certain circumstances that we have no control over. I was just, this person was just born that way, or I'm unlucky, or it's somebody else's fault that this is happening to me, or I'm unfortunate by fate or by whatever. But in essence, I'm not responsible for unhappiness, for suffering, so we've gone to the opposite extreme. At first, it was misused by many religions. God's punishing you because of your sins. And now we move to this other place of where I'm just unfortunate. I can't do anything about it. This is how I am. This is, it's not my fault. That attitude. And we create so many theories of why, of causes of sickness and illness and suffering. We create so many theories, and they're valid as far as they go, but we also deny the fact that the real cause, deep within myself, there's a nucleus of negativity. There's some denial of love that's actually deep in my heart, and this is the real cause. So we have to come back into the center of things, these two extremes. But we do have to take the ownership. We take the ownership and we actually want to see it. We want to see what's there inside of us so we can really see what the true cause of suffering is. So there's no pain, that's not in some way the result of this, denial of God, denial of truth, denial of love that's in our heart. Every pain that exists in some ways related to this issue, that we are denying God in a very deep place within ourselves, which means denying love, denying truth, denying goodness. Some of us want to now see that and take responsibility for it. Now, what do you do? Right? So if we've seen that this is what's in us, and we also are ready to take responsibility for it, there's still a problem. That we're unable, strangely enough, we're unable to do anything about it. It's too deep, it's too subtle, it's too powerful. This is, again, a particular phase on the spiritual path that everybody has to encounter. First, you have to recognize it's there. And then you have to see your powerlessness before it, that you can't just decide with an act of will to take it out of yourself. So what do we do? What do we actually do? What can we do? Well, the first necessary thing, if you've already recognized that's there, we have to first, this is the very first step, once it's recognized, we have to first believe that a way out is actually possible. Even though I can't do anything, but I still believe it's possible that this can actually be removed from my heart. We can all say that we believe that, right? We're devotees. But do we truly believe it? Do we truly believe that darkness, all these things that I struggle with within myself, do I truly believe that they can be completely taken away? I can become completely transformed. We believe it in our heads. Do we believe it in our emotions? Do our emotions believe that, yes, God can completely transform me. I can become a pure devotee by God's grace. It's actually possible. I was a devotee, practicing devotee for many years, and just everything going well, going smooth, but it was like 7 or 8 years before I realized that actually I don't believe that this is possible, that I can be changed. Because you struggle with something for so long, right? For so many years. Or you see something within yourself and you see it keeps coming up, and then you start to, oh, this is never going to go away. Do I really believe it will go away? It can go away. So that's the first step, is that we actually have to really believe a change is possible. Faith, real faith. And unless we take that first step of making room for the possibility of a change, then we can't take the second step, which is also necessary. So for anything to happen in your life, you have to first conceive it as a possibility in your mind. You want to accomplish something, or achieve something, or somebody comes up with some new idea or anything like that. First, there has to be this opening in the mind that this is possible. If even right there, there's a block, you don't think it's possible, you'll never achieve it. So we have to deeply, in our emotions and our soul, we have to believe that total transformation, removal of envy is actually possible. That's the first step. And then the second step is that when we actually believe you know, this can happen, then we have to just surrender. Just surrender to God. I know we hear that so much, but it's so deep, to just completely surrender to Krishna and allow him to change us. But it's a surrender. It's like giving up our own, our own ways of changing myself, my own safety valves, my familiar safety valves, my pseudo securities, my own ways, and just surrendering to this divine, this higher reality of Krishna's grace. There's something called the grace of God. It's a whole other energy. It's a whole other reality that exists. And from the heart, once we see this darkness within us and we see our powerlessness and we make room in our minds for the possibility of a change, and then we completely surrender to God within our hearts. And from that, we'll start to get little glimpses of the reality of God's grace, of the reality of the mercy that's actually possible. We'll get little glimpses first, and those glimpses start to encourage us. Oh my God, this is real. This is for real. There's this material energy, and there's also a spiritual, divine, pure energy that I can come in contact with, and that's within me. Little glimpse here and there. And what happens is, at first, it's like you have to take, because we're not experiencing that mercy, that divine energy, you take a risk to surrender to it, to let go of your own way, and to accept this divine way, this divine process coming from God. At first, it feels like a risk. But as we start to glimpse the reality of that divine energy, it becomes less and less risky. And it starts to become just a natural attraction. It's just an experienced reality. So you may still fall back sometimes into old bad habits, but now because of a little taste of something different, your movement towards that higher energy starts to become more natural. And look at this story, right? Look at the carefree consciousness of the cowherd boys, the absolute trust of the cowherd boys. What is their faith? It's not that they were trying to be faithful for Krishna. They're in a state of absolute trust. They've experienced the reality. It's also described that the cowherd boys, because they saw that Krishna had already saved them a few times, and the demons came and Krishna kept killing them. So the cowherd boys were trying to understand, Aghasura was so large that they couldn't make out, what is this? This just looks like a beautiful part of the forest. Is it a cave? Oh, they got closer and realized this looks like a python, a gigantic python. And some of the boys were wondering, is it a statue or is it actually alive? And before they even came to a conclusion, they just kind of said, well, anyway, even if it's alive, let us go in. Let us go in and play. And they were smiling and they were clapping. And they just marched into the mouth of this python. And when Krishna saw this, even Krishna was astonished. He was astonished to see, because he was about to warn them not to go in, right? He's about to tell them, this is a great demon, actually. Do not enter, it's dangerous. But before he could stop them, they just marched in happily. Why did they do that? Because the cowherd boys, they knew that Krishna would have to do something wonderful to save them. They knew that no harm could come to them from this demon, because Krishna has always saved them. If there's Krishna, there's nothing to be afraid of. So in, maybe it's a real python, maybe it's not, maybe it's a demon. Let's just go in. Krishna's going to have to do something wonderful to save us, and then we're going to experience that. fear. It's this state of just faith. So wonderful. So it's like, so this is bringing us up to date with these verses today, that they start to go, they're going in, and Krishna's wondering, now what should I do here? Because I wanted to stop them, but they wanted to go in. So Krishna lost this battle. He was conquered. They had a desire, he had a desire, but their desires were stronger. Their desires actually overrided. They overrided Krishna's desire, because Krishna loves to be conquered in this way by his devotee. He allowed for it. He wanted to stop them. They wanted to go in. They ended up going in, and Krishna lost, in a sense, from what he had intended. But he likes to lose in this way, because he went with it. My devotees are going in. Okay, now I have to figure this out. This is his pastime. He's not really, this is still part of his play. But he's figuring out in this verse today, it says, now what is to be done? How could both the killing of this demon and the saving of the devotees be performed simultaneously? She was wondering, what should I do here? I have to kill this demon, but I also have to make sure my devotees are protected and safe and blissful. So, as they entered into the mouth of the snake, then the mouth closed. Everything was just total darkness. And then you have the situation there. You have a confrontation. And Krishna also, entered in after the cowherd boy. So he's also inside the snake now. The mouth closes, and then you have this confrontation with Krishna and then calves. And it's, again, taking it within ourselves. You see, there's that envy. There's the sin of envy very deep within us. But Krishna's also there. And if we can allow Krishna in through faith and through surrendering to him, allowing him in, then he'll actually destroy. He can totally destroy, remove completely the envy from the heart. First, we have to believe it's possible. And then we also have to completely surrender our hearts to him, letting go and just surrender it to him. And then we'll see the outcome as these verses go on. I don't want to go further in the story than where we are. So we'll end here and stay tuned to hear what happens. And remember, the symbolism here is important to remember, because it makes everything very real and alive for us. We're not just hearing a story. It's also a story. It's a beautiful pastime. It's a kind of joyful ecstasy, but also for ourselves, this agasura, right? There's the demon of sin, very deep in there, and it's blocking our surrender to Krishna. And there's envy. But if we allow Krishna to really become dedicated to that, gradually we'll see what happens, how he overcomes these demons like it's nothing. It's just nothing for him to do so. He's just waiting for us to allow this process. We have to cooperate with this spiritual process of bhakti. And then it begins to take place. So I'll stop here. A few minutes left. Any thoughts, reflections, comments, questions?
Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu. Great class. You told us not to overthink Krishna's pastimes, but at the same time, you gave us such a wonderful purport to it. Ghanashyam Prabhu, thank you so much. Ananda Manjari Didi has her hand raised. Ananda Manjari, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for this class. I so love the point of necessity of introspection, and also realizing that we even need to beg to be able to see the anarthas that are in our hearts, what to speak of begging for helping, removing them from our hearts. I was curious about the point that you mentioned earlier, and I would like to receive some clarification on it. You mentioned that like some of the cowherd boyfriends are like they are eternally cowherd boyfriends, and some of them reach the state of being cowherd boyfriends through their devotion and their purification. So can you speak more on that?
Yes, it's just the understanding is that some in the spiritual world, when we talk about Vrindavan, there are some eternal residents there. It's like, people in our world today, there's people through practice of bhakti, they return to that. They achieve that state of life and of consciousness. So some are there that have never fallen, in other words, they're just kind of like completely there with Krishna eternally. And some achieve it after, because there are so many living entities, here in this world. And it's also a possibility for some of us. So it's it's the idea that there is the eternally there that have returned there from.
Yeah, and does it mean then also that those eternal residents of Vrindavan are all expansions of Krishna?
In a sense, but they're also, just like we say, expansions of Krishna, but they're individual jivas, but it's all that same, pure spiritual potency, you could say. The whole spiritual world, everything in Vrindavan is this completely pure energy, just like everything in this material world is in a one sense of the same material energy, but there are varieties, there are individuals. So that same principle, applies in the spiritual realm. They're expansions of him, but they're also individual beings. Like the sun and the sun rays, in a sense, the sun rays are expanding from the sun, but actually both are eternal. As soon as you have the sun rays simultaneously. So even the word expanding sometimes is a little confusing when you enter the spiritual realm, because everything there is eternal. The sense that you have everything is eternally existing. So sometimes the words can confuse us a little.
Ananda, are you satisfied with the answer?
Anyone else?
Yeah, Adipusha Prabhu. Oh, hold on. There's a question from Kartik. Adipusha Prabhu, can I take it?
Yeah.
What's the line between being carefree and trust in Krishna versus being careless and hoping that Krishna will clean up our mess, protect us anyway? Weren't the cowherd boys were a bit on the careless side?
Yeah, that careless state is the result of, first, for us at least, it's the result of first being very cautious and very careful. But eventually it matures into a carelessness when the trust becomes absolute,
Yeah.
First, we take risks.
Me too.
Me too, about what?
I don't know.
And we have to be a little careful. We have to surrender, but also just be
Change it.
It's like you want to take a jump of faith, so there is a kind of need to take a risk, but we also have to jump very far when you're first very secure on the ground. If you're not secure on the ground, you try to jump, you won't get very high or very far. So there is a need for us to first be a little secure, a little careful, and then we take a risk. But eventually, by you keep taking that risk, you start to see that there's no risk at all. It's actually an illusion to say there's a risk. It's just the natural thing to do. It's just to completely depend on Krishna. And then in that more advanced stage, it's actually you can say it's carefree. It's just like, yes, in all circumstances, I surrender. So those are different platforms. Would you have something?
Well, on that very important question you asked, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that there's an illustration that the cowherd boys are jumping over the teeth and running down the tongue into the throat of the demon. And then up in the clouds, there are demigods. And oh no, they're going. So he was saying that there are different grades of devotees. And there's a grade of out of care for Krishna. The demigods are concerned for their own gain and safety and the devotees. And then there's other devotees that are more, well, let's not say, they're both valid, that are fearless. So if we're just demigods, we become fearful because attached to our own comfort. Excuse me? I can't hear you. Your voice is breaking
I was
up.
just saying that's a good point. With the demigods, their reaction was quite different.
Was what? Different, right? It was different.
Great point. That's all.
We can choose to be like demigods or like, have a complete fearless attitude.
Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu.
Ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Ghanashyam Prabhu ki jai. Thank you very much, Ghanashyam Prabhu. Very nice class, hopeful, Shastrik. Very happy to see you personally. Adipusha Prabhu, are you helping us take darshan of Krishna? Can hear you. All right, brief darshan of Adi Prabhu's lotus head. That's all we get for today. No problem. We're happy. Okay, so yeah, there are demons in our heart, but there's also Krishna, and Krishna is capable of dealing with them. So, yeah. Okay, he's back. Connecting to audio. Domi, thank you. Domi is our saving grace. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Have a wonderful Saturday. Give it to Krishna. Keep your Kartik vows going. And I'll see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Yeah, Jamuna Jaya there. Yes, nice. It's not the same without your smile. Reach Bhakti, Arjuna, Prabhu Ghanashyam, Prabhu Yukeshwari, Suzanne, Angel, Amish, Krishna Daya Prabhu, Bhima Prabhu, Snow White Krishna, Nachi, and Kartik. Kartik, great question. Everybody appreciates the question. Yes, thank you, Kartik. Okay, Hare Krishna.